ほら、ルフィ、今一緒に海賊になる仲間を探してるんだ。
Hello guys, welcome to my channel The Wandering Zoro, your go-to destination for anime-related content. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest videos. In today's video, we're going to be diving into part 1 of the series, What If Izuku Unlocked the True Power of One for All? So be sure to stick around until the end, and let's get started. The Wolfman looked at the tattoo that had seemingly magically appeared on his chest and gasped, "My mom is gonna unilive me." What the tattoo looks like. Momo deadpanned at this. Really? That's what you're worried about? Izuku looked at her and noticed her cat ears and tail again. "Oh yeah, and that too, wait, I remember now." The feline girl peeked up at this. "Remember what? Why I turned into a cat girl overnight, or that I am now a cat girl?" Izuku started to sweat nervously before he explained, "Well, do you remember how I have basically a mindscape or inner world inside of my quirk where I can go and talk to the past users?" The newly made Nico girl at hearing this stopped and thought for a moment before nodding her head. "Yeah, I think I remember you saying that and all the knowledge you dropped on me the other day. But what does that have to do with me becoming part cat like my mother?" Izuku sighed at her, bring up the bombs he dropped on her with One for All and his past of being quirkless. He rubbed his neck before explaining, "All right, well, it all sorta started when I woke up inside One for All." Inside of One for All, the teen wolf fell from the sky, landing face first onto the concrete. He stayed there for a second before his throat let a small groan escape weakly from his mouth and heard someone in front of him giggle. Lifting his head, he saw Nana stifling her giggles and failing horribly. That was hilarious. Ninth. But on a more serious note, we need to talk. Izuku pushed himself off the ground and stood to his new full height, which was a lot taller than Nana's. He stretched his body and yawned, still somehow feeling tired while in his mind, "Okay, what's up?" Nana pointed over her shoulder to Banjo, who was yelling while gesturing at the distant void, and to his companions, "I'm telling YA I saw it. And if it's out there, I'm gonna catch it." Ian sighed and wondered why he was cursed to be here, and Haikage merely stared at Banjo with a deadpan glare. The rest were just trying their best to ignore the boisterous man. Izuku and Nana walked over, and Izuku asked him, "Banjo-san, what are you talking about?" Banjo turned and smiled while the rest groaned, knowing exactly where this was going. Banjo wrapped his arm around Izuku's shoulders and brought him in close and spoke like an old fisherman talking about a mythical fish or an old man talking to the main Pokemon game character. "I've seen it. A beast of beauty and grace, yet also a ferocious one. It walks amongst the void and howls out in freedom." At hearing this, the others sighed or groaned. Izuku raised an eyebrow. "Banjo-san, can you maybe take this more seriously and tell me what's going on?" Banjo's face faltered before catching himself and sighing. "I saw something that looked like a wolf in the void. I think it may be the representation of your new quirk, since YA know you're basically a werewolf and all." Izuku was surprised to hear this, but then hummed in thought and turned to look into the void, while the others started debating on if Banjo even saw something at all. They were so entranced in proving Banjo wrong that they didn't see Izuku start walking off into the void as if there was still floor underneath his feet. Izuku was in a sort of trance as he looked upon what he recognized as a wolf made of galaxies and stars. What it looks like. The ninth user walked on until the others noticed his absence and went pale as they turned to look at where he had gone. Nana was wide-eyed and turned to Banjo. "What the hell? How long has that thing been there? It's the size of a house." Banjo smiled smugly. "I have no idea. But I'm right, so that's all that matters." Nana glared at the older man and slapped him upside his bald head, slamming his face into the concrete and leaving a large crater in the floor. Meanwhile, with Izuku, he had approached the magnificent beast, and when he was in front of it, standing a few feet from its front paws, he reached his hand out, slowly at first, but then the fear of it retaliating lessened completely, and he fully reached out with no fear. The wolf's nostrils exhaled, causing Izuku to flinch slightly. But he didn't retract his hand, and the wolf, after a few silent moments, nodded in respect to this as if it had tested him. As Izuku interacted with the wolf, the others looked to each other, each of them wondering what the hell to do, while the ninth played petting zoo. "So we didn't get to tell him about the fact we feel connected to that girl he's with. How are we gonna break the ice to him once this whole situation is over?" said Nana. Yoichi shrugged. "Probably be blunt like usual. Nana nodded to this before turning back to the sight of Izuku and the wolf eye can do blunt. Back with Izuku, the wolf had laid itself down and put its head forward to nuzzle his hand, and in doing so both of them glowed brightly in a rainbow of color. The others covered their eyes to not be blinded by the light, but it barely helped as they all a second later blinked the stars out of their eyes. And when they finally regained their sight, they saw the ninth with his eyes glowing and body going through a transformation that put all werewolf movies to shame. Holy Nana started. "Oh no!" finished Banjo with a huge grin. Izuku, however, wasn't paying attention as his world turned white, and he left his mindscape to awaken in the real world. Flashback ends. And that's the last thing I remember. Although the past users are currently catching me up on the fact they can feel your connection to me through my quirk, explained the green-haired young man. Looking now at his lover, Izuku could see her flabbergasted and surprised expression, which he thought was extremely cute. He waited a bit until she composed herself and spoke. "So I'm connected to you, and that's why I'm a cat girl now?" she asked with her head tilted in confusion. Izuku nodded at the question, "I guess. I mean, I'm not exactly sure, but I can take you to Recovery Girl to make sure if that's what you want." Momo gave him a questioning look. "Are you serious asking if I want to get checked out after cat ears and a tail appeared on my person out of seemingly nowhere?" Izuku didn't say anything until he thought over her words. "Are you acting like it's Tsunda because of your new cat awakening or because you want to mess with me?" "A little bit of both if I'm being honest," replied Momo. Time skip. Izuku had taken Momo to see Recovery Girl, who was rightfully angry to be woken up at such an early hour such as 5:17 a.m. But on seeing the two and their new appearances, she quickly rushed them inside her office. The greenette hadn't noticed it before, but he had grown to a full height of 7 feet 2 inches, which was barely an inch off of his mentor All Might, much to his own surprise and fright at being so ridiculously tall. Momo had also gotten a bit taller as well, but not as dramatic as Izuku. Her height had shot from 5 feet 8 inches to 6 feet 2 inches, making her moniker of Class 1A's Amazonian princess a bit more realistic. There were more smaller changes depending on who you asked, which Izuku would have tended to downplay most of his changes, but to Momo and Recovery Girl they knew they were all quite dramatic. For one, Izuku had a fully grown beard and hair on his other areas like armpits and his chest, but more than that his body packed on even more muscle than before, making him almost on par with Endeavor in musculature. Momo, during her test, had found that her nails could elongate on command, and when she wasn't paying attention and had gotten bored. But more importantly, Recovery Girl told her she would also have a heat cycle similarly to her lover, but hers was only every couple of months. In all, they both were ridiculously changed from before, and it was all the fault of his quirk, it seemed. Recovery Girl had run a few tests and found his new ability was called Mate's Mark, which evolves and strengthens as lover or lovers. Izuku blushed at that last part. Yet that wasn't all to the ability, as its activation only occurs when he impregnates his partner or partners. So in other words, Momo was going to have a baby. On hearing the news, Momo covered her mouth with tears in her eyes, and she clutched Izuku's hand in worry, but also a mix of joy and maternal protectiveness. After a few moments to come to terms with the situation, Momo asked a question that popped into her head as soon as she heard it. "But I used a plan B. I shouldn't be, and especially not so soon. That's not biological possible." Izuku, after getting out of his own shock, nodded along with this, wondering how this came to be. All the while, the past users congratulated him on, in Nana's words, seated the rich Amazon girl. Recovery Girl grimaced at hearing the questions the two shot at her, but did her best to answer. "It seems that his seed is so potent that no plan B will ever work for anyone that has slept with him. In other words, if even a drop enters a woman's WMB, they are likely to become a mother." That explanation made both teens feel down. It wasn't their fault really, due to Izuku's strange quirk awakening all of a sudden and their heightened hormonal state due to pheromones causing them to have it in the first place. So it wasn't their faults, but it sure as hell felt like it due to their newly discovered parenthood, and their natural self-doubt came to the forefront of their minds. Yet Recovery Girl, on seeing their reactions, immediately snapped at them. "Oh, for the love of, both of you weren't in control, so this isn't either of your faults. Don't even think about blaming yourselves for this. This was purely an accident, simple as that." Her words helped the two get out of their funk, but that still left them with their situation of becoming parents so soon. Momo looked to Recovery Girl with her lover's hand in hers and asked, "So when exactly will I be giving birth? I know it may be hard to know, but can you give us an estimate?" Chiyo Shuzenji sighed deeply while walking over to her test results on the two, and grimaced deeper after reading it well. There's good news and bad news, which would you rather have first? Izuku and Momo looked at each other before Izuku gave her a smile, and Momo returned it. They looked to the pro-heroine and said in unison, "Bad good." "Wait, what? Why choose the bad good?" both asked the other. Momo blinked and raised an eyebrow before replying, "Well, I thought you'd like to hear the good first so we can enjoy the moment before it would be crushed." Izuku in turn blinked. "Oh, I guess that sorta makes sense. But I usually prefer the bad news so that I can feel better after hearing the good news." Both could understand the other's reasoning and turned back to Recovery Girl, who was looking at them both with an unamused expression. "If you're both done, I'd like to continue." Seeing the two stay silent, the heroine explained, "To answer your earlier question, dear, you will be pushing that baby or babies out in about a week." Momo's jaw dropped, and Izuku was no different. That was before their minds went full analytical on the situation, thinking of how it was even possible, why their luck was so trash, and a dozen other questions and theories. It took Chiyo hitting them both on the shin to wake them from their stupor, and Momo half shrieked out in response before meowing at the end. Izuku similarly whined like a dog getting hurt. Both sounds made Chiyo surprised, and she wrote a few things into her clipboard while also feeling bad for thinking she hurt an animal from the noise they made. After calming down from the news and their embarrassment about the noises, they could now make Izuku ask the question on both his and Momo's minds. "And the other bit of news?" Chiyo raised an eyebrow. "Oh, that. There was neither good nor bad news. I just wanted to mess with you both to stop you from going catatonic from what I just told you." Both of the young adults stared at the amused nurse before shaking their heads and continued to talk some more. They scheduled the talk with their parents by asking Chiyo to inform Nezu of what has happened and a few things to help Momo throughout the week to come. The talk came to an end when Izuku's classes with his 3 new instructors were approaching that the green-haired boy had to say his goodbyes to Chiyo, and the pair left to the dorms. Izuku wanted to put his lover in one of their friend protection while he was gone, as the instinctual urge caused him to do it. It was probably around 7:45 a.m. now that their run to Recovery Girl was over, and on entering the dorms, the two were met by their class, who were all in multiple different stages of worry. But upon the class hearing the doors open, turned to okay the entrance with relieved smile, but quickly turned to utter shock and bewilderment. Kyoka put it the best way to describe their surprise. "Holy cow." Well, most would have used less vulgar words, but the essence was there. And oh my Kami, were they surprised. The girls looked at Momo, who even in her wheelchair looked like a goddess taken form, just with added cat ears and tail. What she looks like with a new cat ears and tail. The guys similarly looked at Izuku in his hulking glory, his muscles flexing as he pushed Momo towards them, and his face looking like a rugged man who's seen things and experienced far more than any of them. It definitely didn't help when he stood next to Kyoka that the height difference was fully shown. Izuku is taller by a lot more, but then again, I don't mind Kyoka going to be around 5 feet 10 inches once she goes through her transformation. So when the two got in front of them, all Izuku's quick high shook them violently from their dazed states. Some fell out of their chairs, and some stood up and pointed at the pair with eyes the size of dinner plates. The most dramatic, however, was Kyoka, who had a nosebleed at the pair's handsome and beautiful transformations. It all made Izuku and Momo sweat drop, and wonder if they were really that different from how they looked the other day. But at thinking that they couldn't help but think they would have reacted even worse if they hadn't also learned of Momo's cat ears and their 2 tattoos. So can one of the girls watch Momo for a bit? I had to go meet up with my new teachers for my new quirk training. On hearing Izuku's question, Kyoka immediately stood back up off the ground that she fell on due to falling out of her chair and appeared to have blood-drenched tissue paper in her nostrils and proclaimed, "I'll do it." Surprised by the punk girl's response, Izuku meekly nodded before rolling the heiress in front of her best friend and gave the raven-haired girl a kiss and some comforting words before leaving the dorms. Even after he left, the majority of the people present were looking at the door he had left out from, while the others looked to Momo inquisitively pondering about her new features. Momo noticed the looks and sighed before explaining Izuku has another aspect of his new quirk. To put it simply, whoever he has slept with will evolve in a way to their quirk or something else. As you all can see, I have manifested my mother's cat quirk, which is strange, but I'm not complaining. The creation uses words immediately made Mina squeal in delight before shouting, "Oh my god." Momo blushed, but decided she needed to get some support from her friends, so she asked the girls to accompany her to her room to talk. Obviously, they thought it was tea time and basically flashed the girl away as fast as Izuku with no coffee running to Dunkin' Donuts for the nectar of the gods. In all, it was hectic, and the squeals Mina let out even caused their neighboring dorm to Class 1B to become curious as to what happened, but that wouldn't be answered until a bit later. With Izuku, the young man swallowed some saliva that had built up in anticipation due to what was in front of him. His first class of the day was with none other than Midnight for his newly dubbed lust lessons. Shiver. So yeah, he had ample reason to be nervous, so much that a shiver went down his spine. And could you blame him? For one, he had no idea what the R-rated heroine had in store for him. And two was the fact his heat was as high as ever since he had woken up this morning, and Cammy, he was starting to pant just thinking about just being around a woman like Midnight. Thankfully, this morning he had just enough willpower to focus on Momo's new additions and not asked to reenact their lovemaking from the day before. However, he didn't think his will was strong enough to not pounce on the sexual-themed heroine, and he felt like trash for knowing he would give in to temptation. With that all in mind, he felt his stomach drop as he grasped the handle and turned it, and what awaited him inside was nothing like he imagined. Midnight-sensei, why are you in nothing but a bath towel? He really tried to will his not-so-little PP to stay soft, but it was a fast-losing battle. Midnight looked at him with a flutter of her eyes and motioned for him to come closer. And on reflex he did and approached the woman as she sat on a stool. When he was a few feet away from her, she uncrossed her legs and stood to her full height, not even caring for giving him a show of what was between her legs. She noted his newly built frame, height, chiseled face, and purred in satisfaction. To answer that, I will say this. You are going to be strapped to this chair, and I'm going to do all sorts of things to you. Your job is to resist as best you can, and if you do well, I will reward you. Izuku growled slowly, not particularly liking the idea of being chained down and not in control, but her appearance and tone made him concede. Midnight, or Nemurai Kiyoma, was having a blast already, but knew she needed to get down to business before the perfect male specimen in front of her would actually pounce on her. She pushed him back and into the chair, and automatically the chair locked around his limbs, the action causing Izuku to growl deeply in irritation, but Nemurai stopped it with a finger to his lips. Oh, poor thing. Don't worry, I'm here to help you, she said with the most appealing voice Izuku had ever heard before. Izuku's mind went blank and his eyes turned blue and slitted. His instincts had taken over and he was no longer in control as his mind had gone fuzzy. Nemurai noticed this, though, and sighed mentally as she started to let up on the act, even if she was honestly pretty horny for the green-haired young man. Seems you already need a break. I'll give you 10 minutes to compose yourself before continuing. In the back of Izuku's mind he heard and understood, but it took the whole 10 minutes to fully stop his dumping, as the guys in his class called it. But not even a minute later he needed another break. It went like this for a solid 2 hours before Izuku made a little bit of progress, which was that he made it to 5 minutes, which proved this task was going to be a lot harder than either of them thought. However, this did give the woman some fun and good practice in being extremely flirty, or well, more flirty than she was ever allowed to be, since there were harassment laws and other nonsense she couldn't get around. Though even she could tell she went a little too far by the end of it when she was fully naked in front of him and had taken his pants and underwear off all while sitting on his lap. Yep, just a smidge too far, but who's to say, since she surely wouldn't, and Izuku was in a throbbing, panting mess with his eyes full of lust that were currently eyeing her. Oh well, they still had about an hour until he had to go to his next appointment for the day with Ryukyu, so she licked her lips and asked him something that would change her life without her knowing. Say, why don't I give you a little present for being such a good stud? She basically purred into his ear and pressing her melons against his chest. Izuku's only response was a small growl and to like at her neck, much to the purple-haired woman's pleasure. She giggled at this and leaned into the licking and responded back. Well, since you're so eager, let's just stop playing around and connect. The wolf teen growled a little aggressively, which caused her to become confused before looking at his face. It was one of those looks a kid gives when they are given a toy that used to belong to their sibling, which caused Nemurai to giggle. Oh, don't worry. I may portray myself as an experienced woman, but truly I've only had those adult experiences with women, so you'll be my first and only male. Izuku perked up immediately, and his licking turned to biting on her shoulder that caused the woman to make voice loudly and for it to echo through the room. Nemurai, after a moment to compose herself, slapped his shoulder playfully. "Bad boy. I'll have to punish you for that," she said, not even noticing the mark appear on her shoulder in its inactivity state, waiting for the impregnating to start the evolution sequence. Something like this. When he marks a woman but hasn't impregnated them yet, the tattoo is fully black with no galaxies in it yet. It also didn't help that Izuku was going to be late to his appointment with Ryukyu, but he and Nemurai wouldn't care when the dragon would come over and complain, since they'd be too busy still going at it when she arrived. Ryukyu, the number 10 hero, also known as Ryako Tatsuma, was tapping her foot. She was so because she was annoyed and really freaking horny. Why, you may ask? Because her whole reason of coming to UA had been ball deep inside of the R-rated heroine and had released inside of the woman enough to make her stomach budge, and Ryako had just walked in on them after finding Izuku Midoriya being late to their meeting together. Now, it wasn't like she cared if he slept together with anyone, or even midnight for that fact, but upon walking in on the two, the pheromones had assaulted her sensitive nose and caused her ovaries to quiver in need. So now she was as horny as Cowgirl, the female heroine in the U.S.A. who had giant horns to go along with her extreme height and huge rack. The only good thing about this situation was that Ryako had an amazing poker face that rivaled Cementous's, and that man had a Lita cinder block for a head. Her blush was the only problem, as her cheeks were lightly dusted red. But thankfully, with Izuku bowing in front of her with his head touching the ground in a Dejiza position, he was unable to see her blush. Coughing into her fist, she spoke to the young man in front of her while eyeing the drunk Nemurai, who was still passed out with half-lidded eyes and a goofy smile plastered on her face. "So, wanna explain how this happened?" Izuku gulped audibly, and he spoke from his Dejiza position. "I'm sorry, but after training she decided to give me a reward, and things got out of control from there." Ryako stared before going over to Nemurai and kneeling down next to her, she poking the passed-out woman's stuffed stomach, causing the pruplet to groan. Turning to Izuku, the dragoness raised an eyebrow before speaking. "It seems more like a reward for her than one for you. But then again, I guess it was mutual." Izuku turned an even deeper color of red, but didn't retort, since he had nothing to save face to the remark made against him, since what she had said was completely correct. "Sorry," was all he could say. Ryako huffed at the apology and got up from her kneeling position next to Nemurai and walked to the front of Izuku, causing him to shiver from her eyes staring down on him. "Well, since we're behind on time, let's get started now so we actually get some practice in before Rumi gets her hands on you. Hopefully you don't F her too, or else your training is going to have to be harsher," said the dragoness. Izuku paled at the idea of going through tougher training, so he nodded rapidly. But then he turned back to Nemurai, who was still dazed and out of it with no clothes on. "Shouldn't we at least dress her first before we get started?" Ryako shrugged. "I don't care. If you want to put your clothes on her, then fine. But hurry up, we only have an hour." The greenette looked at the dragon female incredulously for a second before shaking his head and going over to dress Nemurai in his t-shirt and her panties, which were conveniently next to the desk they had fornicated on. An hour later, with the little time he had with Ryukyu, it was enough for him to learn about some of the smaller things, like how to pop out his claws, his enhanced hearing and smell. They were supposed to get through his enhanced eyesight and tracking, but they didn't have enough time, so he had to end the training with her and rush over to the gym he and Rumi would be using for the day. He had left Nemurai in Ryako's care, getting a groan from the pile of mush that was Nemurai, as she had woken up at some point but was too out of it physically to get up, and her throat was very hoarse due to screaming during their earlier activities. When he made it to the gym, he opened it to see Makurumi in all her glory. The woman was stretching, and when he opened the door, she had turned to see him and smirked with excitement. "Oh, you're finally here. And it seems you've been busy. Sniff, sniff, you smell like that dummy woman." What she looks like currently. The grin says it all, but don't forget she's 5 feet 2 inches, so in other words, she's a buff short stack that can kick butt. The wolf teen wanted to apologize, but his instincts told him not to, and when he smelled the air, he smelt the scent he knew but wasn't sure where he had smelt it from, as his library of new enhanced smells weren't all figured out yet. "Hello, Mako-san. And yes, I and Nemurai slept after our session was done." The number 5 heroine smirked deeply at this new boldness the young man was showing her. Definitely different from the day before, she noted, as not only was his attitude different, but his body and overall aura had changed overnight. "Nice. Well, maybe if you're lucky I'll let you get some stress relief in after our session as well. But only if you get my engine revving, big boy." She cracked her knuckles intimidatingly, but for Izuku it made something inside of him approve immediately, a reaction that Rumi noticed but didn't bother mentioning. Almost instantly they got into a fight, but Izuku was ordered not to use the strength port of his quirk, I.E1 for all to try and focus on the newly awakened werewolf quirk, which meant he had to take it even more seriously than he already was. Ducking under kicks and blocking those he couldn't dodge were the only options he had, as he wasn't fast enough to get past the pace Rumi had set. So in an attempt to escape her barrage of kicks, he lengthened his claws, causing his fingernails to turn black and lengthen to sharp tips. Once a kick went past his head, he struck out, clawing the thigh of the dark-skinned woman, causing said woman to jump back to get away from the sharp nails. But she was a little too slow to react, as 4 thin red lines bled on her thigh. "Oh, nicely done. But let's step it up a notch. Let the beast out, kid, and don't be afraid of it. So just go all out." Izuku listened to this as the number 5 hero became more serious and started hitting him with enough force to bruise his strengthened body, which had been evolved to tank strong attacks. He was forced into letting go of the control over his instincts and allow his inner animal come out and fight. Rumi noticed his new transformation quickly as the green-haired young man's eyes turned slitted and glowed blue. His forearm hair thickened. Already long nails lengthened more, turning black, and looked stronger. His canines had also grown longer and sharper. "Is like this in his first form, Wolfman. I like what I'm seeing. Now get over here and fight me," shouted Rumi maniacally. The primal side of Izuku roared in response and lunged at the woman, who didn't falter under his intimidating figure. The battle went on way longer than it was supposed to and lasted about 3 hours, making it into the afternoon. But by the end of it, Izuku was extremely bruised but healing slowly. Rumi didn't have a healing factor like Izuku, so she wasn't so lucky, as she was bleeding from lots of cuts, but mainly from a large amount of claw gashes on her legs, arms, thighs, and even her rear. Yes, he had at one point slashed her on the rear, but that didn't mean she didn't retaliate for this, though, as she had kicked him into one of the ceiling lights, breaking it and electrocuting him a little. But that was earlier, and as for now, they just laid on the ground, panting heavily in exhaustion. They were sweating buckets, and for some reason that Izuku didn't understand, he felt really freaking horny. Maybe it was because he was attracted to Rumi's strength? Or was it due to his already big crush in the heroine before he had gotten into UA? Either was plausible, or it could have been an entirely different reason for all he knew. A foot away from the teen laying on the concrete floor, Rumi grunted as she sat up, holding her side, which had a long claw mark that went from the side of her melon and down to her hip. The woman was in barely any clothing, as it had too many rips and tears to be called clothing. She looked at the young man that showed great strength and endurance and asked, "So wanna do it?" "Yeah, time skip." So he FD Mako, the number 5 heroine, and his new instructor. Yeah, honestly, with how the day had been going so far, he shouldn't be surprised anymore. But for some reason, he was feeling like he had forgotten something. Probably nothing, the young adult thought as he took a bite out of his Wagyu steak burger and a handful of fries. He had almost missed lunch due to his time with Rumi, but he had run straight to the cafeteria from the gym they were using to get there before lunch rush was finished cooking for the day. The cafeteria was actually pretty active today, even though it was a Sunday. In fact, there were at least double the amount of people in it than normal, causing Izuku to realize something. Isn't today parent-teacher day or something? He asked to himself now, noticing the adults, or more likely parents, looking at him in ripped pants that were more like shorts and with stains all over them, and of course a lot of crimson stains caking his body. "I guess that's a thing," the teen said before getting back to his food. However, when 2 people approached him, he glanced up to see not only Momo but a woman that was a few inches taller than her and with long luscious hair that hung down to her knees. What she looks like and what she's wearing. Izuku gulped down the food in his mouth and waved at his first mate, his lover, his girlfriend, and future wife. "Hey Momo-chan, it's good to see that you've gotten better and can walk now. Is this woman your sister by chance?" Momo blushed in embarrassment, responding while shifting her eyes from Izuku and to the woman. "Hello, Izuku, and thank you. But actually, this is my mother, Shizune Yorozu, and owner of the Yorozu Corporation." The scruffy teen smiled innocently at the woman and greeted her. "Well, it's wonderful to meet you, Mrs. Yorozu-san." Shizune smiled curtly and replied back in her deep yet feminine voice, "It's nice to meet you as well, young man. But it's Miss, my husband isn't with us anymore. But more important, you are the father of my soon-to-be-born grandchildren." Record scratch. Those who were next to Izuku's table either gaped in shock at what they had heard or coughed on the food they were eating. The worst were those who had taken a sip of their drinks and did a spit take. They all turned to Izuku's table and stared at the three, a few of the mothers leaning into each other and whispering about the juicy gossip they had just heard. On Izuku's part, he nodded and spoke. Yes, I am Miss Yorozu. I wish it was under better circumstances that we would be meeting, but I can't say I regret becoming a father to the children of myself and your daughter. Even if they were conceived while not in the right mind, I will still take full responsibility and love and support them and your daughter. Shizune smiled at this a little. At this I see. And what do you feel for my daughter exactly? Obviously the mother was asking this to look out for her daughter, and Izuku understood this, so answered honestly and spoke from his heart. Well, I'd be lying if I said I didn't have a crush on her before this, and I don't know who couldn't form a crush on her with how great she is. She's not only unbelievably smart and beautiful, but also a very gentle and kind person. In all honesty, I never even thought I had a chance with her, and now here I am becoming a parent with her by my side after learning of her already budding feelings for me. It's all just so amazing. I sometimes wonder to myself if I'm dreaming or something. The silence that hung throughout the entire cafeteria was all Izuku got in response, which made him nervous as he stared at the still smiling mother, which slowly started to unnerve him. But before Izuku could fully break into a sweat, Shizune turned to Momo and nodded. I approve, but don't give me too many more grandchildren before you graduate. Momo blushed at her mother's words, but nodded happily nonetheless. Yes, mother. I'm grateful you approve of him. Shizune waved her off with a motherly smile. Well, you can't hate me for wanting the best for my daughter now, can you? But forget that for now, my Doriku, and you can call me Shizune from now on. The teen blinked before he replied back, okay, why, oh Shizune-san. The older brunette shook her head but continued to smile. That'll have to do for now until you get more comfortable with me. The three continued to talk as Momo and Shizune sat down with Izuku at his table. The green-haired teen noticed that Momo and Shizune had plates with seafood and vegetables. He wondered if Momo's cat mutation she apparently got from her grandmother, from what she told him, had also affected her and her mother's taste in food. But when Shizune answered that it may be partly due to that, but also that she just liked seafood like the majority of her family, those without cat mutations included. The hero in training jotted that down in his quirk analysis and asked Shizune about her quirk, causing the mother to giggle and Momo to blush at her lover's antics, but also form a smile at his cute curiosity about quirks. The lunch had ended a little bit after, and Izuku said his goodbyes to Momo and her mother as they left to the dorms. Izuku had wanted to go train his body a bit more, but as he walked towards the gym, his phone rang, causing him to stop and reach into his shredded pants to answer it. Hello? On the other side was his mother, Inko. Izuku, honey, where are you? I'm at your dorm building with Mitsuki, and this lovely young lady I met on the way here said you weren't here. Izuku facepalmed. How could he have forgotten that his mother would arrive on Parent-Teacher Day? He had literally met Momo's mother, and he somehow forgot that his own mother would probably be coming today as well. Sorry, Mom. I forgot you'd be coming for some reason, but I'll head right over. Just give me a few minutes and I'll be there soon. Inko's smile could practically be heard from the other side of the phone. Okay, honey. I'll be waiting in the common room for you. Izuku smiled unconsciously in return as he replied, sure thing, Mom. See you in a bit. He hung up the phone before full-on sprinting to the dorms, not even stopping when passing by Monoma, who was probably boasting to his parents, and it didn't take him more than a few minutes to arrive at the dorms and enter through the double doors. Upon entering, most of the occupants looked at him, but only the students recognized him. But when Inko looked at the young man, she quickly noticed the freckles and familiar green hair and eyes that made her realize who he was. Izuku. Oh. Inko cried out. Said boy waved and greeted his mother, hey Mom. Inko didn't wait a moment as she ran and enveloped him in a hug before holding him at arm's length and peering over his tattered shorts and bruised body. Young man, you have a lot of explaining to do. Izuku rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly while responding, I know. To put it bluntly, I went through a change due to my quirk evolving, and my current state of dress is due to training to adapt to my new changes. The green-haired mother just gawked at what her son had said. Izuku. How in the world would training make you point at his form like this? A blonde woman walked over and added on, she's right, kid. UA may be rigorous, but nothing that would make you look like, well, I was gonna say terrible, but that's putting it mildly, as you look like absolute trash. Izuku turned to the blonde woman and said with an expressionless face, hello to you too, Aunt Mitsuki. Mitsuki rolled her eyes at the boy she saw as another son and jabbed him in the shoulder. Yep. So anyways, what's this training that got you looking like you got into a cat fight with a lion? The ninth user of One for All sighed before explaining, well, Principal Nezu called in a few favors to a couple heroes to help train me. The one to actually spar with me was the number 5 heroine Mako, which explains my injuries, but don't worry, they're healing already. Inko perked up at the last part. What do you mean healing? And what change with your quirk would make you grow so tall, muscular, and hairy? The others in the common room who were listening were also curious at this and paid full attention on the explanation. Well, to put it bluntly, I have a transformation-type mutation now that is basically a werewolf. I have a couple forms, but I have only used one so far. And finally, I have increased strength, stamina, and all of my senses are enhanced. I also have a sort of regeneration, but it still takes a while for me to heal. There's more, but I'm pretty sure Nezu would want me to keep that secret for now. Cool, said the younger brother of Tsuyu Asui, which broke the silence and caused everyone to start asking questions to the teen. Beast. But thankfully he was saved from the onslaught of questions when the doors opened to show Momo and her mother Shizune accompanied by the principal and 2 women wearing the school's PE uniform that Izuku knew all too well. Nezu, seeing everyone looking at him, gave a wave and greeted them all with his usual cheered greetings, you human filth. I'm here to talk with Mr. Midoriya. Inko, thinking her son was in trouble, quickly asked, is there something wrong, Mr. Nezu? The Chimera put his hand on his chin while thinking aloud. Depends on what your definition of wrong would be referring to. Inko blinked in confusion before her son inquired before her, I think she means if I did something that would get me in trouble or something involves me that is of importance. Ah, I see, said Nezu before turning to Inko. Well, to explain what I am referring to. Yesterday your son had slept with a female student while under the influence of his rutting cycle or heat cycle due to his quirk evolving. Now this isn't really a problem, as from Recovery Girl's tests show that any female he gets preg will give birth in a week at most, so no real need to expel the female or take them out of the hero course, as I've made preparations already. However, earlier today he had a few hiccups. Izuku's mother almost fainted at hearing this news, but just barely stayed conscious at hearing the last part. What do you mean by hiccups? Nezu's smile grew at hearing this and answered, why of course I mean that Izuku has. He was stopped mid-sentence as the doors burst open to reveal a panting and sweaty Recovery Girl who gasped trying to catch her breath. The group let her do so, and after a minute and a cup of water later from Momo, she looked at Nemurai and Rumi, who were wearing PE clothes, with nervous looks. Chiyo sighed in disappointment before turning to Nezu. Sir, I forgot to inform you that Mako was starting her heat cycle and shouldn't be around Midoriya just yet since they'd most likely reproduce. However, it seems I'm already too late. Nezu nodded to this while Inko fully fainted and was caught by Mitsuki, who was laughed hysterically. Meanwhile, the rest just stared between Izuku and the 2 women in tracksuits. Yet it was only Momo that seemed to be fine with this new information. Maybe because Izuku was her alpha and mate? Well, she didn't really know, but for some reason she was alright with this. While Momo was contemplating her inner feelings of very unluckily for Izuku was being approached by a true beast, Shizune was not so keen on this news and said as much when she appeared next to the wolf teen and gripped his shoulder in a vice grip. Midoriya-kun, would you kindly explain what that rat is referring to? How expression? Izuku on his part paled dramatically and gulped. Things got out of hand rather quickly, with Momo's mother strapping Izuku to a chair, and off to the side Izuku saw Inko crying a river while hugging Momo, Rumi, and Nemurai. But Izuku was more focused on the woman in front of him, who was glaring. Do you want to explain yourself, young man? Izuku gulped, but also felt his primal urge to defy Momo's mother. Thankfully, due to Ryoko's training, he was able to calm his inner wolf and reply normally. I'm sorry I slept with Nemurai and Rumi, but they asked for it. Okay, he was officially screwed, and it was all his stupid brain's fault. However, before Momo's mother could kill and orchestrate him, Momo got between Izuku and her mother. Shizune's eyes glared at her daughter before softening slightly. Momo, father to your child or not, I must punish this boy for doing this to you. So please move. Momo shook hearing her mother's dead serious tone, but the younger Yorozu stood her ground. Mother, I don't blame Izuku for this. And if you'd let me explain, I can tell you why. The mother stared at her daughter for a full minute before responding, you have a minute before I make him suffer. Go on, dear, explain why I shouldn't harm this cheating scumbag. In relief, Momo let out a shuddering breath and quickly explained, Izuku isn't in control of his actions with his new quirk activating. That's how he got me preg in the first place. Now him having it with Miss Midnight and Mako is shocking. It's not like I didn't see it coming. And in fact, I don't mind as I am bi and am proud of it. So, in other words, you want him to form a harem of women he can impregnate whenever he wants? Asked Shizune in bewilderment. Momo blushed deeply as she twiddled her thumbs. Yes, I guess I do. It was pure silence until it was broken by the father of Uraraka, who was eating popcorn with the rest of the parents off to the side. Wow. He's living the dream, ain't he? The other fathers nodded before getting slapped or punched by their partners. Momo and Shizune looked over at them and facepalmed at realizing that they weren't alone and had just shown family drama to them all. Does this mean I can get untied now? Asked the wolfman, feeling the ropes chafe on his wrist. Shizune glared at him for a second before sighing and cutting the ropes off of him. Fine. You've been excused this time, but if you ever hurt my daughter in any way, I will unalive you. Not torture. Izuku gulped and whipped the sweat from his brow. Yes. Inko walked over to him with the new additions to Izuku's love life. Both heroines were still a little sheepish as they greeted him. Izuku, these girls are so beautiful. I'm so happy to see I'll be getting more grandbabies soon. Inko said with tears still falling from her eyes in happiness. The teen wolf smiled at his mother and two women that he breed recently. I am to mom. But I would also like for you to meet Momo's mother, who is the CEO of Yorozu Company. Inko treated the mother of her future daughter-in-law and grabbed the three preg girls and one young man, dragging them over to the table with surprising strength. They were sat down, and Izuku could hear the other parents and the rest of the class snickering at him being manhandled with his impressive size. He sighed when he saw his mother take out the photo album from his childhood and started showing the others. In all honesty, he should have expected it when he heard it was family day. Inko showed a particularly embarrassing photo to Rumi, who snorted and looked in his direction. But upon making eye contact, she went fully red-faced and shot her eyes down to her lap. Huh. Seems Rumi is more docile now that she's becoming a mother. Wait, how would her quirk react to my advanced preg aspect? Would she give birth quicker or have more than one baby on average? As Izuku was lost in thought just a little ways behind him, Kyoka spoke aloud. Do you think he'll get any more girls in his harem? Denki, who was nearby, shrugged. Probably. After all, I know you like him, and so does HK. Kyoka jabbed him in the ear with her jacks as her face was enveloped in a cherry-pink blush. Don't say that out loud, you idiot. Besides Kyoka was her mother Mika Gyro, who smirked at her little girl. And what might this be? Do my eyes deceive me, or is my little girl into the tall, hunky wolf? The punk girl blushed deeper and groaned into her hands. Mom. Mika giggled at her daughter's behavior. Don't be like that. From what we've seen so far, he may just eat you up without even trying. Mom, I'm not gonna F Izuku. Oh, so you call him by his given name? Mika countered. You? Ga F this. The purple-haired girl stomped off and towards Momo in the couch, wanting to be with her best friend to get away from her mother's teasing. Giggling, Mika looked to her side towards Kaminari's mother, who was staring at Izuku. Dumbly quirking her eyebrow, Mika leaned in and asked, see something you like? Kaminari blushed at being caught, but didn't stop her gazing at the young man who her son had told her so much about. She licked her lips and replied back boldly, yes. And I think I may just go take a bite given time. Denki's mom is Kami, because Denki needs a father figure who can be a good role model for him and drive him away from becoming a skirt chaser. Mika blinked in surprise before shrugging. Good for you, I guess. I would too if I wasn't happily married. Kami nodded and started speaking to Mika, not noticing her son Denki go wide-eyed and paper white at the thought of his friend and classmate becoming his new father figure. Time skip. The family day was going in full swing. Rumi and Nemurai had somewhat gotten out of their shyness and were acting more like their usual selves, minus the few times they would blush and look at Izuku lovingly whenever they saw him. Everyone noticed how they were acting and wondered if Izuku was so good in bed he could make women fall in love with him on the first go of things. From what they were seeing, that just may be the case. Although some of the girls were glancing at him too, which was noticed. Uraraka, Toru, Zu, and Kyoka were the most discreet at it, but then there was Mina, who straight up ogled and shyly groped him, much to her mother's surprise. Mina's mother, who was a biologist, took note of her daughter awful flirting with the scruffy teen. The way Mina would hug him or awkwardly drag her hand up and down his arm was strange in her mother's eyes. Alexandria Ashido was a woman of logic and facts, way different from her ex-husband, whom Mina happened to get her personality from. So seeing her usually boisterous daughter act so meek and shy with her affection was very surprising to her. Mina's mom is Andro 21. It makes too much sense in my head for this not to make sense to everyone reading this. Alexandria wasn't the only one to notice their daughters acting differently around Izuku. Uraraka's mother, Tsuyu's mother, and Tori's mother also noticed. Each of them felt curious at their daughter's infatuation but didn't feel against letting them pursue the young man that apparently snagged the heart of 3 women, maybe more. They did, however, wonder if he had the stamina to compensate for so many girls in his life. Meanwhile, with Izuku and his girls, the teen was sighing at his mother's actions that were embarrassing him. Inko had moved on from the pictures and was now talking to the girls about possible kid names for the babies. Momo had blushed as red as her hero outfit when asked this, with Nimurai and Rumi reacting similarly, but lessened as they weren't being watched like a hawk from their mother unlike Momo was. The Ravenet had suggested the name Selena for a girl and Michael for a boy. Rumi had admitted she liked the name Scarlet and Adam, and when it was Nimurai's turn to say her name, she blushed and spoke quietly to the point no one heard her. "What did you say, Nimurai?" asked Izuku as he leaned into her side and put his hand on her lower part of her back in a sign of reassuring her. Blushing again, Nimurai spoke, but this time loud enough for them all to hear. "I want to name my daughter Hera or Hestia, and my son will be Percy, short for Perseus." Many raised an eyebrow at this, Izuku included, the lycanthrope asking the question on their minds, aren't those Greek names? Nimurai leaned into his touch as she explained with a far-off look, "I lived in Athens growing up before moving in my early teenage years. When I was younger, I had aunts and uncles on my mother's side who were all named after Greek gods. I am the same. For instance, I am named after one for my middle name, which is Aphrodite, and I want my children to keep that tradition going." "I didn't know you were Greek, but that name does suit you, Nimurai. You absolutely fit the criteria to be a goddess of beauty," said Izuku truthfully. Nimurai blushed harder and turned to bury her face into his chest. She wouldn't deny it, but his words made her heart leap into her throat and her face to form a wide smile. Over on the other side of the couch, Inko started crying full force again, the tears shooting off and hitting anyone nearby, which just so happened to be the Ida family. Rumi and Momo smiled at the scene, thinking how wonderful of a man Izuku was and how lucky they were to have him as theirs, and laughed at the unfortunate Ida family who were now soaked head to toe in tears. Later in the evening, the parents said goodbye to their children before heading home, with the last being Inko, who made dinner for the class. She had insisted on doing this much, at least much to Izuku's dismay. Yet now the short woman was being escorted by his mentor All Might to take her home. Izuku didn't know why he insisted on All Might, but he had an inkling that for some reason his inner wolf was howling to keep her protected by having her guarded by the strongest individual he knew. He chalked it up to his new instincts and walked back into the dorms, and walking up to his room, he waved to the stragglers who were going to stay up a little longer. But Izuku wasn't one of them, as he was tired mentally from all that had transpired recently. So ascending the stairs, Izuku went to his room. The door opened easily enough, but Izuku wasn't ready for what lay inside for him. Inside his room was completely different looking from this morning. The room itself looked to be expanded, and the furniture had been switched out with new paint on the walls. Speaking of walls, the previously covered walls of All Might merch was gone and replaced by a stone-like paneling, the floor now covered in carpet. In all actuality, it looked great minus the fact his merch was gone. And of course, the fact the bed was fixed from how he had broken it the night before was nice too. It also seemed it was big and nearly the size of Momo's if he was gauging it right. The room is a mix of these two, or you can just pick whichever one you like more. "What happened to my room?" he asked aloud. Nimurai, who was in a large dark purple t-shirt, black panties, and her red glasses, answered, "Nezu had Cementos fix the place earlier today, and moved your merchandise to go with your mother since she was coming over for the day." "Hey!" And the room seemingly expanding. It was Momo who answered this time. "I have been moved into your room, so Mineta switched with me, and I took where his room was and added that space into yours. I also sent the belongings that I didn't need back home using a moving company." Izuku nodded softly to this. "Okay, is there anything else I should know that changed in my room?" Momo nodded excitedly and got up from the bed, showing off her black nightgown. She walked over to a table and shelf. "This is where we can do homework. The bookshelf has enough room for all our books and notebooks, as you can see, and my favorite part is this." She opened what seemed to Izuku like a wooden box, but the said box opened up to show a record player with a music disc already set inside. Momo had turned it on and placed the needle on the record, which started playing music. Surprised by this, Izuku smiled at the cool retro piece of music media. It also helped that the music that played was tasteful and nice to hear in his enhanced ears. He turned to Momo and thanked her with a smile. "It's wonderful, Momo. I love it." Momo blushed and pushed a piece of her hair behind her ear as she responded, "Thank you." But that's not all. Momo pushing her hair behind her ear. Moving over to the other side of the room was a small lounge area with a couch and a couple of beanbags, and right behind the couch was another slim table that had a projector for when they wanted to watch movies or TV shows. It would project them into the wall in front of the couch. Izuku absolutely loved it and kissed Momo on the lips as a thank you. But they weren't done. Apparently, Momo found out about Izuku's secret appreciation of coffee and showed him a custom coffee maker with a similar tea set next to it so they could both make and enjoy their favorite drinks together. The wolf man fully hugged Momo and picked her up in the air before kissing her on the lips this time. And once the kiss was broken and Izuku sat her back down on her feet, the heiress was mentally gone completely, giggling with a dazed expression plastered on her face. Rumi, who was in the closet, came out without an undergarment and was only in red panties. Raised an eyebrow at seeing the two. "What's up with the cat?" Nemirai answered this with a smirk at the bold display. "Oh, nothing. Just Izuku pampering Momo for doing nice things for him." The rabbit heroine let out a soft "hoo" as she looked at the heiress. She then turned to Izuku and looked him up and down, smirked at seeing him ogle her melon. "So you gonna stand around all night or come to bed?" Rubbing the back of his head, Izuku apologized for staring at her. "Sorry. Let me get out of these clothes and I'll meet you in a second." Rumi purred from deep in her throat at hearing this. And before Izuku could comment on it, she hopped onto the bed and quickly got under the covers. Her head popped out a second later from under the covers as she waited for him to join her. Izuku, who had seen the entire thing, could think only one thing: how is she so cute? He stood like that for a solid few seconds before he shook his head and walked into the new walk-in closet and searched for clothing to wear to bed. He didn't have anything that would suit him for bed, so he instead undressed until he was only in his boxers briefs. After throwing his other clothes into his dirty clothes hamper, he exited the closet to see Nemirai and Momo also under the bed sheets. They seemingly had joined Rumi while he was in there. He smiled at the sight of his mates laying in his bed with room saved for him in the center. Walking over to them and entered the empty space, he was immediately latched onto, with Rumi claiming his chest with the other two grabbing his arms. Blinking at the new sensation of laying with multiple people in bed, Izuku got over it quickly and pecked each of them on the forehead. He also asked Momo to turn the lights off, as Rumi had already got comfortable pressing her melons against his upper abs, which Momo did, and turned the record player off as well before joining them back in bed. "I love you, Rumi." "Momo." "Nemirai," Izuku said with a loving tone in his voice. The three women kissed him on the lips in return for his words, and responded with an "I love you too" each. Izuku closed his eyes after this and hugged them all closer towards himself before drifting off into slumber, going unnoticed by them, the tattoos on Nemirai and Rumi glowing softly as they slowly started evolving in their sleep. Inside One for All, our green-haired protagonist appeared back within his quirk world, the ever-black void coming to be a familiar to the teen at this point. But there was just one problem. The void had changed. The blackness of the void was now sprinkled with white stars, clouds, and full moons of various colors and sizes, the biggest of them being a greenish hue with the other three orbiting it. Something like this, but with the main moon being green, and three other moons, one being red, another being purple, and the last being white. "That's new, if you haven't noticed," said the ever-familiar voice of Nana, the seventh One for All user. Turning behind him, Izuku saw Nana and Yoichi there, seemingly expecting him by how they stood just a foot away of his spawning point. Whatever he would call the place, he appeared when coming into One for All. "Yeah, I've noticed. But it seems that's not all that's changed," state the teen wolf. Nana nodded at his assessment. "So you've noticed. It's a lot better than the old slab of concrete, if I do say so myself." Behind her and Yoichi was a large cabin with an almost ominous woodland surrounding it. And behind Izuku, where he was originally looking, was a large lake filled with black water that shimmered with the reflection of the stars and moons. "The cabin where the past users will stay from here on out." "Nice. Well, if you like horror movie cabin in the woods type, that is," said Izuku while glancing at the ominous woodlands. Yoichi shivered at that. "Don't get me started on when this place originally changed to this. I almost shat myself thinking I had gone to hell until Nana smacked me out of my shock." Izuku's sweat dropped at that. "I didn't need to know that. But while I'm here, why don't you explain how me and Momo are connected since you didn't get to last time? Nana shrugged and started walking. Sure. Let's talk while we walk. They started walking down the dirt path heading to the cabin, and Yoichi started to explain. So basically we can feel her life force, I guess, is the best way of putting it. We can sort of sense where she is. We found that out when you separated from her earlier today. We could still tell where she was the entire day. Izuku rubbed his chin. Hearing this, that'll be useful for hero work. What else did you notice? Yoichi stepped over his stick as he started speaking again. We aren't too sure. But with those other 2 moons appearing when you mated with those 2 women, nice work with that, by the way. Izuku blushed, and Yoichi quickly moved on anyway. As I was saying, we are now connected to those 2 girls through those moons and have felt a slight change since they joined us. Like a new power is emerging from the energy they have given one for all since joking or something. We don't really know if you'll start getting their quirks like you are ours, or if it will affect their quirks by empowering and changing them before giving them to you. Or maybe it's something else entirely. We won't really know until it happens. Yoichi and the others reached the door and opened it to reveal the inside of the cabin. Banjo was sitting in the couch, with the only other occupant being Ian, who was drinking a glass of scotch. Waving to them, Izuku greeted, "Hey guys." Banjo looked his way and waved back while Ian nodded in Izuku's direction. The team then turned back to Yoichi, asking a question that plagued his mind since last night. "Yoichi-san, what happened to the wolf from the last time I was here?" The white-haired man frowned at this. "To be perfectly honest with you, we don't know. The place changed after you touched it, with a bright light enveloping everything, blinding us for a few seconds. And by the time our eyesight had returned, it was gone without a trace." Izuku stared at Yoichi in surprise, but deep down he felt the wolf was still there, watching him and waiting for him. And Banjo attested to this. "I saw something out in the woods earlier today, just around the time you were fighting that rabbit chick. I say it's waiting for you to go full wolf mode until it'll show itself to you in here, in a type of showing you got the guts or whatever to show it who's boss." Banjo's words, for how baseless they were, still felt truthful, and Izuku could sense he was mostly right. The beast wanted Izuku to be ready for when it would show itself, but he didn't know what it would intend to do when it did. He didn't know how he knew this to be the case, but he didn't need to. One for All was a mystery in itself, and this was just one of many mysteries to come when it came to this quirk and its inner workings. So with a sigh, Izuku went over to the couch and flopped onto it. He rested his eyes for a second and let out a deep breath to relax as Nana sat next to him, putting a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "It's gonna be fine, kid. So relax for now and start thinking about all the ladies you'll be betting soon. My money is on the dragon woman being the next to be claimed," Nana said with a completely straight face. Banjo barked a laugh at this, slapping his knee in doing so. "Don't make me laugh. The 9th is definitely gonna go for the rocker girl with the auxiliary cord earlobes next." Nana pouted and glared at the bald man. "The hell he is. Dragon girl all the way. Rocker girl. Dragon girl. Rocker girl. Dragon girl. Enough," shouted Yoichi, getting between the 2 who had stood up and started grabbing at each other. The 7th and the 5th users stopped fighting and turned to Yoichi, the white-haired man looking them dead in the eyes. He spoke, "Is gonna get with the pink-haired girl for the support course anyway, so quit your petty fighting because you're both wrong." "Oh no, I screw off," the bald and female users shouted at the audacity of the first user. Meanwhile, Izuku, who had moved over to sit with Ian's side. Ian, seeing his discomfort, offered him a glass of scotch. Izuku, seeing the glass, looked up to Ian with a raised eyebrow, mentally asking if he could even taste anything while inside One for All. Ian, however, shrugged and pushed it towards him. The scruffy young man shrugged before taking the glass and sipping from it, the burning sensation of the alcohol surpassing him, but then turning into curiosity at how the hell that even worked. The 2 continued to drink from there onward, completely ignoring the 3 others behind them who had started a fist fight with each other, Banjo getting punched in the nose, breaking it 1 second, then Nana getting kicked in the kidney and Yoichi getting thrown through the coffee table the next. "Are they always like this?" Izuku asked, hoping that wasn't the case. Ian's responses was a simple shrug, which Izuku took as a probably, but I don't know. I'm an introvert, so I don't hang with them that much. With that said, the 2 continued ignoring the others and enjoying each other's quiet company. So, this was the end of part 2 of this series. Stay tuned for next part of this series, and if you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time.